Welcome to Unit 7 on functions. Today we're going to talk about whether a relation is a function or not. And I want to remind you first of the definition of a function. A function is a relationship or a rule that defines a domain and a range. And for a relation to be a function, each and every input that you insert into the function must yield exactly one output. And so we'll explore that idea by looking at a few examples. Example number 1, determine if this relation is a function. You and your birthday, how do you know? So we said that any input must yield exactly one output. So the question we're really asking is, if you list a person and you list their birth date, will each of the inputs here map to exactly one output? So I'm going to use some, I guess, personal examples. For me, Mr. Brew, my birth date is 8/19/82. I was only born on that one day. I have no other birth date, and so it seems for me anyways, if you input Mr. Brew into this relation, you get back a single output, that being August 19th, 1982. We can imagine other people. We'll just make one up. Let's say Jimmy. And Jimmy was born on February 25th, 1985. Jimmy was only born on February 25th, 1985. He has no other birth date, and therefore, Jimmy as an input yields only one output, 2/25/85. I have another friend, we'll call him Alex, and he was also born on 2/25/85. In fact, Jimmy and Alex are twins. And so we take a look there. If we input Alex to this particular relation, we get back a single output, February 25th, 1985. And so it seems that no matter who we insert into the function, we get back one output, their particular birth date. It doesn't matter that there are two outputs that have the same value, only that each input maps to a single output. And so I would say that this particular relation, you and your birth date, is in fact a function. Let's take a look at number 2. In number 2, we have a similar situation. The x's, of course, are the inputs, and the y's are the outputs. And so deciding whether this is a function, we essentially have to say, does each input give exactly one output? And something that I like to do to help me decide this is, and you'll notice I did this in problem number 1, is make a table. Because I feel like in a table it becomes very clear if each input yields one output. Let's start right at the beginning. An input of -2, according to the arrows, gives an output of 1. However, in this particular relation, an input of -2 also yields an output of 3. And because we have a single input yielding two different outputs, that means that question number 2 is not a function, and it is merely just a relation. Let's take a look at question 3. Again, determine if the relation is a function. What we're looking for for it to violate the function rule is if there are any input that yields two different outputs, then it would not be a function. So let's take a look here. The number 8 as an input yields an output of 45. And that is all. It is the only output for a pH of 8.0. Similarly, an input of 7.5 to the function yields an output of 69. It is the only output when you input 7.5. An input of 7 yields only 78. An input of 6.5 yields only 88. And an input of 6.0 yields only 43. There is no input that yields more than one output. And therefore, I would say that number 3 is a function. Question number 4 asks the same, is this a function or not? And again, I like to organize things into a table because I feel like that helps me keep my thoughts organized. Our first input is 2, and for an input of 2, we get an output of 3. Our second input is negative 2, and for negative 2, we get an output of 3. And finally, for an input of negative 1, we get an output of 3. So again, we ask ourselves, when we input 2 into the function, do we get a single output back? And it looks like we do. When we input 2, we get back only 3. Good so far. When we input negative 2 into the function, how many outputs do we get back? We get back just 1. It's the number 3. It does not matter that the number 3 shows up multiple times. Only that each input yields a single output. We check the last one. Negative 1 as an input yields only one output. It is 3. And therefore, it looks like number 4 is yet again a function. Try the rest on your own and consult the key if you have any questions.